Welcome back to the Higher Grounds podcast. Thank you for joining us. As you can see, we're back at the Lighthouse Baptist Church in Seagrove, North Carolina, where Brother Michael Poindexter is the fine pastor here. He started this church back in 2005, and the Lord's been blessing the place, and we're certainly happy that the Lord allowed us to cross paths with Brother Mike and with the church, and we've had a good communion and fellowship with them down through the years, and we're thankful. And also good again to have Brother Chad Bailey, Slippery Rock Baptist Church, Slippery Rock, Pennsylvania, the fine pastor there for the last 6 years. Good to have you back aboard the podcast.
Might I say, the only Slippery Rock Baptist Church in the world.
How about that?
So it's not hard to find.
Yeah.
Google it.
That's a shameless plug. There's nothing wrong with that. You've beat up on him for 2 or 3 episodes.
I didn't say a
you
word.
treat the
I
man
just-
bad. That's no wonder we can't get anybody to come on the show.
Well, since
show.
Yeah, that's what Matt. That's how he sells it to the TV station in Paisley.
since
The
we're
show.
aggravating each other, let me
Yes.
go ahead and throw in some weight here that
You can do that.
Man, it's a good thing Brother Bailey is a fine gentleman. He would have done Nikita Koloff to you across the table. Go ahead, Brother Bailey, before you were really interrupted. Yes.
Every church was named after the community that
Yes.
it was founded
Right.
in.
Right.
The church at Ephesus, the church at
Right.
Colossae,
Yes.
the church at Thyatira. And so actually, people who would make fun of the name Slippery Rock Baptist Church, it's actually the most scriptural name of any of the churches that are at this table right now, because there were no Lighthouse Baptist churches in the New Testament.
Yeah, but that's the name of our community, Lighthouse Community.
Oh, okay. Well, there you go.
I'm just picking.
All right, okay. Moving right along, we want to get into the meat of the message.
Man, I can't believe that. Man,
What? Can't you believe?
I thought we had a pretty good church name, but I'm feeling kind of convicted about it now.
I wouldn't.
Should we change it?
Who cares?
Because really, we're not really in Seagrove. Our address is Ashboro.
It's a good church name in another dispensation.
Ashboro Baptist Church.
Hey, we don't want to talk about
But we're on the outside.
We ain't talking
hey,
about
I got one.
Well,
We'll be
I'm
Happy
working.
Hollow Baptist Church, because there's a little community right through the woods called Happy Hollow.
Oh.
And Happy Hollow would be a really cool name
I
for a
love
church.
that.
But yeah, you like that?
Very catchy.
Moving right along with today's podcast,
Yeah.
we want to come to you and say thanks
Technicolor.
to Brother Bailey.
Your church's name could be Galilee Baptist Church. like
Galilee.
Brother Andy's.
Galilee.
Galilee Baptist
Yeah.
Church is a real.
Never mind. There's not a river. Nowhere near that place.
That's the truth.
Yeah, that's true.
But of course, Galilee wasn't a river.
Well, you know what I mean. It was a sea.
just like the moon is not a planet.
That is true.
What was in that coffee?
I don't know. Speaking of coffee,
Richie
Henson, yes, sir.
who is
He's a 2-bagger. This is the bag number 2 he sent us. Right?
Richie Henson sent us a bag of coffee from
Yeah.
from the what coffee company?
It's the Black Rifle Coffee Company, not Rifleman.
Not Rifleman.
Matt's been saying Rifleman for a long time. I finally got him to say Black Rifle Company.
You're the first one that started off with the Black Rifle Man.
Man.
To me?
Yes.
Oh, I thought Matt started it.
No,
you sure?
it's you.
I thought I was helping Matt out of a bind.
Richie Henson sent us some coffee.
Yeah, Richie. Thanks,
And
man.
he is Richie is a coffee connoisseur, buddy.
that he is.
And he is, buddy. And Richie Henson has, he's on they ship him coffee regular.
Oh yeah, he's like on a mailing list or something like that. Yeah.
Have you ever been to the Black Rifle Coffee Company, to their plant?
No, but I did see the Rifleman show one time when I was a kid.
Black Rifle Coffee from Richie Henson. I've actually been to the plant. It's in Savannah, Georgia.
Oh, I love
Outside of Savannah. And
Everything
it's-
comes out of Georgia's great.
Yeah.
Not
Yeah.
so.
Yeah.
We'll find out. Honestly, they're voting right now. We'll find out.
I'm afraid so.
We'll find out.
You're right.
See how the Senate goes.
You're right.
Can any good thing come out of Georgia? That's the question.
Now they're not going to know. We filmed this on the night of the election, and it may not go up for a month and a half.
Well, not the night of the election. It's the night of the runoff.
Right. Well, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Anyhow, we're back.
We're back. Thank you, Rich.
Thank you for
the coffee. Yep.
It is a blessing, and we appreciate you and your family. Appreciate your church.
Yes.
And how God's blessed y'all. Appreciate Brother
Keep it coming.
Montgomery. Yeah, keep the coffee
Yeah,
coming.
keep the coffee coming.
Absolutely. We've got Brother Matthew Tucker behind the camera. He is our cameraman. He is our in-studio producer.
Yes.
Hannah Duffield is our post-production
He's the head of
manager
sales
and
and
post-production
marketing.
Yes, Matthew is he is marketing us out to local cable access TV
Yeah.
and thrifty nickel papers and things of that nature.
Steals and deals.
Exactly right.
What you need is for him to be your public relations officer,
Yeah.
We do need
especially after
Yeah,
this
we do.
broadcast.
We do need one.
You offend a lot of people on here, and if you just chill out, we would probably get a better viewership.
I'm not the one cutting up today. It's you.
I'm just feeding on Brother Bailey. He took it for 2 episodes. He finally is unleashing the beast.
Yeah.
He started out talking about your church name. I didn't get offended by that.
Galilean. It's beautiful.
That's just me and you talk.
So that's the way you've been wanting it for a long time.
You got that right.
Just
friend.
slide me out of the frame.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Turn that camera this way, Brother Matthew. We are friends, and we've been friends a long time. As far as, and one of the reasons why we cut up so much one with another is because we're in communication, the three of us and several others of our friends, on a regular basis. I mean, every week we talk. Mike and I probably talk about every day.
Yeah.
And we just have a good time. And with the podcast, we want to be very transparent with you in regard to just our relationship one with another, and the fact that we are Christians and we love the Lord. But we're not a stick in the mud. We have a good time.
Absolutely.
We enjoy living life.
Absolutely.
We enjoy having a good time. As a matter of fact, in days to come, I don't know how far down the line this is, but you're going to see some changes in the Higher Grounds podcast where we're going to be starting to show you a few things that we just do as human beings. The things we do that we enjoy in life as a part of the package of the Higher Grounds podcast on social media. Sure. We look forward to bringing that to you. Also, we have been contacted by a few different internet radio stations about taking some of the materials that we're posting on social media and them taking it and reposting it to radio stations. So by the grace of the Lord, we're going to be reaching out different places, different ways, and different means to try to get the message out. And so we're grateful for every door of opportunity that God has and is opening for us. And we hope that even through our frivolities that God can get some element of glory and can do a good work in the hearts and lives of those who are listening on the podcast. And I appreciate Lighthouse helping us with the podcast and others. And I thank you for opening the venue to us, Brother Mike.
Absolutely.
We could, over the last 3 weeks, enjoy getting together with Brother Bailey while he's in the area. Well, today we want to get to the material that we said in a teaser sometime back that we were going to be talking to you about, and that's the subject of biblical modesty. As a preacher, I pastor a church. I still hold very conservative standards in regard to clothing and what I deem to be biblical modesty, not the conformity to a religious standard set by any hierarchy of groups of preachers or colleges or camps. Anybody that knows me knows I'm a very individualistic individual. I mean, that's kind of who I am. And I just try to set the standard of my life on what I believe the Lord would have me and my family to do. Sure. And I didn't always have, what the kind of biblical modesty standards that I have today. I didn't always have that. And what I do today has been shaped by my wife and I, what we have seen in the Word of God. And that being said, I'm very grateful for the opportunity to serve the Lord, and I want to serve Him in every capacity. And that's my modesty and my decorum is a major part of that.
Certainly.
How in your travels, preaching around the country, have you seen this slipping, and have you scratched your head saying, I mean, how can you even think that that's modest in a church?
I think, yeah, it has. I've only been saved a little over 20 years, but and I say that saying this, it's sad that even in that small amount of time, because that is a small amount of time if you think about it as far as a lifespan, to see the change that I've saw in that amount of time has been a little bit alarming. And I think what it is, it seems like, I think people you don't think about it when you're in the immediate context, but if you step out of the box and look back, what we're doing is this: we're staying about 5 to 10 years behind the world.
Right.
And as they change or as it changes, we change with them. Which all fits inside the context of this desire for cultural relativity. We're changing with them, but whenever we're costed upon it, we look back and say, now, hang on a second now, we're not like the world. We have higher standards, but you wouldn't look very far in the rearview mirror and see you're really just standing where the world stood 5, 10 years ago.
Right.
And so that's what I'm seeing, an adaptation by church-going, professing believers to stay about one step behind where the world is currently landing. Yeah. And it is a little disheartening. It is.
I remember many years ago sitting in a college office and was talking to a college professor. I was also teaching in college at the time, and these issues were beginning to be discussed, and this was probably 10 plus years ago. And he was really speaking about how that a lot of the standards that people have employed in their personal lives, or platform standards for churches, whatever the case may be, are just not culturally relative, as we were speaking about earlier on last week. And I knew then that this gentleman would be shifting, and he did. He shifted, and he's now no longer in church at all. And that's sad to me. But the shift and the change of the paradigm from where it was, even 20 years ago to now, which we're talking about it being cultural, has led not just to people changing their minds about things, but in reality, I've seen it be revealing about not just their modesty, but about their morality as
Absolutely.
well.
Absolutely.
And as a preacher, have you seen, just traveling and preaching, because I know you do that some too, have you seen that that change as well?
Yeah. The statement that Pastor Poindexter made about how as the world shifts, the church shifts, and we're only staying 2 or 3 steps behind the world. Mm-hmm. I heard a statement in a meeting probably 20 years ago in Memphis. I was preaching and I won't call the man's name. I didn't get any kind of permission to call a name, but he made a statement that I thought was tremendous. He said, "The church is as worldly as the world used to be." Mm-hmm. And that really is a really good measure for the relativity idea, the mentality that comes along with that. And I think that the people that are making these relativity changes, they're making relevancy changes in their churches, trying to relate
to people,
to
their
culture.
Community.
They do not realize that is not a one and done decision. They don't realize that is a package deal.
Right.
In other words, if you cut the cord right there, it is going to cause an unraveling in so many other areas of the church, and it's inevitable. And you and I are aware of it. We've watched the slow motion train wreck of many ministries that started there, and then it was music, and then it was morality issues, and then the ministry basically became a monument to a man that used to be there.
Years ago, I had a friend that was as close to me as a brother many years ago. And he began to make this shift, and he began to talk to me about making the shift. And I said, "Brother, regardless of what you choose to do, removing Baptist from the sign and changing their own personal morality, regardless of what you do," I said, I'm your friend. And I'm going to continue to reach out to you as my friend.
Sure.
And we were as close as brothers. And I did. I continued to reach out and continued to reach out.
Certainly.
And it kept being harder and harder to get a hold of. And I remember one day when I finally got him on the phone, and I made it very clear, I'm not changing. I'm not going to go in the direction you're going, but I'm still your friend. And I remember the day, and I can take you to the place on Highway 74 as I was coming through Monroe or Indian Trail, headed toward Charlotte. And I remember getting him on the phone, and he said, "Listen, I want to say something to you." I said, "Sure, what would you like to say to me?" He said, "I don't want to talk to you. I have no desire to talk to you.
Goodness.
I said, all righty, thank you very much, and goodbye. And that was 15 years ago, and I've never heard one word from him since. He's never reached out one time.
Is he still in the ministry?
And he's still in some semblance of ministry that has not made any impact whatsoever, none. And there are horror stories that can be spoken about in regard to some of that. And
Certainly.
Here's what I'll say: we're not ugly, we're not nasty, we're not degrading
No.
regarding the stands that we take.
No.
I have heard men use terminology in the pulpit regarding modesty standards in their quote-unquote preaching of it that I felt were rude and
It
derogatory
should be rejected.
and should never have been made from the pulpit. Ever, ever, ever. But I'm not going to back up doing what's right just because some are rude. Can I say that again? I'm not going to stop doing what's right just because others are rude.
Yeah.
And this is what our audience has to understand about us, as well as those that disagree with us. We want to present to you why we believe what we believe,
Yeah.
why we stand where we stand, and allow you to take the Word of God and see it for yourself. I have heard things preached from the pulpit about, the color of a shirt or whatever, and whatever, okay? The bottom line, very simply, is this. There have been men through the years preaching on the subject of biblical separation that went into a monologue that became a tirade that was unscriptural. But again, I personally am not going to cease to do what's right because others are rude. So from a biblical perspective, let's start talking about that. We know that the culture has shifted. I can take you, Brother Mike can, to, you were showing me some pictures today of cheerleaders in our own country at athletic events, and speak to the modesty of them.
Those pictures I was showing you were from two different genres. There was public high school, and then there was some from, I think it was the NBA back in the early days. I'm talking about, back in the 50s. And honestly, the uniforms they wore would be considered in today's society excessively modest.
Right.
But now,
More modest than even a lot of churches.
absolutely, by far more modest than a lot of church attire today. Interestingly enough, 50 years, if it was in the 50s, you're talking about 70 years ago. That's usually about a lifespan. So in one person's lifespan, we went from that to where it is today, where it's almost unwatchable,
Right.
in the day and time we're living in. But that's how much in that amount of time the needle has moved.
Right. Yeah.
And the thing about it is that nowadays the church doesn't even stand where the world stood then, for the most part.
Sure.
It now is somewhere in between, which is why the cry, it may not be as extreme to the right of where it's got to, but they would cry out, well, I'm not worldly because I'm not that far yet.
Right.
But if we keep in
We're
a
a whole lot
progression,
farther down the line.
We're
Right.
a whole lot farther down the line than we
So
used to be.
if a person was curious as to see that, what would they Google search?
You just, I think I typed in cheerleaders from the 50s. Or something like that right there, and the images started coming up of they're black and white, because it's old school. And but you start seeing those pictures, and you're like, wow, I'm talking about modest skirts, way down to the ankles almost in some cases.
And what we're basically saying is the measure from the 1950s to right now, which really is not all that long.
It's not that long ago,
that's
yeah.
less than 100 years. Look at how far we have
progression.
digressed.
Yeah.
In that amount of time. Speak to public beaches in America from the early 1900s.
Yeah, whenever you start studying, how the evolution of beach life has come along in days gone by, you find out this. If you look back in the early days, whenever, first of all, when beaches started to be frequented, as a place of recreation, you'll find that in the early days, men and women in the very beginning stages didn't want to be out there together. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
They actually had public bathhouses where you would go in and a woman would come in down to the beach. She would change into something she was going to wear on the beach, and it didn't cover a lot less flesh than it did before she walked into the bathhouse, so to speak. Interestingly enough, I've heard people lament. I didn't go to a Christian school, but I've heard people lament on public platforms on social media how that they called them the hem police or the dress police, and they had measuring sticks and rulers and things had to go certain lengths. That actually existed on public beaches,
Sure
and
Right.
public law enforcement done those very same things back in the day, and you could get charged or
Fined.
ticketed,
Right.
fined if you weren't long enough in your
It was a modesty.
It was a modesty issue along the way. If you start studying that through the progression, and I'll tell you what's real telling for me, I've always had a firm belief that that music was very reflective of the culture.
Well, you're so right.
And whenever we started talking about the possibility of doing this, I started doing a little research and I started looking at music patterns through history and how they reflect what was going on in the culture. And when I was a little boy, I remember a song that used to come on commercials. It happened before my time. I was born in '76, and but this song come out in 1960, and it was that famous little song about the yellow polka dot bikini.
Mm-hmm.
And if you go back and read the lyrics to the song, basically what it is that this girl has never worn one before, and she's trying to go to the beach for the first time in this yellow polka dot bikini. And in the beginning, the first verse is about how she don't even want to come out of the locker room, and then the second verse, I think it is about her coming out and wrapping herself in a sheet or a towel or like a blanket. And then the next verse is about her going and just getting in the water to keep from being seen in that yellow polka dot bikini. That was a day and time when people still blushed at the idea of exposing that much skin in a public venue.
And music was being used to marginalize
Yes.
the Judeo-Christian standard
Yes.
of the culture. And music then, because of its zippy tune and its fun lyrics, was used to normalize a
Yes.
behavior that was looked down on even as being illegal at one time in our culture.
It conditioned the culture and
Right.
moved
Always
it,
does.
Always does. Moved it through the 60s, and then it's just been a continual downward spiral progression since then. The world's moved farther and farther away from a modest context.
Right.
Interestingly enough, we had the privilege to go over, me and my wife did, to go to Japan a few years
A
ago.
modest culture.
Very modest culture. We even, the last day we had an opportunity to visit a very public place and really get immersed in the culture. And I was blown away at the modesty. And I asked the dear brother who had invited me over, I said, this culture is very different in that context than it is back home. He said, oh yeah, over here, he said, the immodesty and the lewdness is not something their culture accepts real well. And I was like, wow, this it almost looked like America 50 years
Right.
ago.
It was.
As far as where it was in that particular genre of
Now,
modesty.
modesty and decorum has always been a part of our society. It really has. There have been laws levied in different states and towns in regard to what a person can wear out in public and what they can't wear out in public. That's always been in American culture because of its Judeo-Christian foundation. That being said, you can take, for instance, most major public golf courses, and there is a standard by which you have to dress not just to play on the course, but to enter the clubhouse itself. So for us to believe that a standard for the church is an abnormal thing is very, very much ignorant, because every part of our society has had a standard of dress decorum.
Listen to this. In our county, in our public or in our local newspaper, every year at the beginning of August, there comes out the public school dress code for the year.
Yes. Wow.
And I read through it, and many, many times I've read through that and thought, wow, if they only knew how legalistic their standards were, if they only knew that if you brought this up at a lot of the churches of our day, some of the preachers would just cry wolf from the rooftop.
Right.
But the sad part about it is what they're asking of those public school students to kind of suppress the natural desire of man and keep those things kind of. What they're doing is they're actually setting a bar higher than most church youth groups have today when they go on field trips or whatever in the summertime, and it's sad.
One of the things that I found quite interesting in our society had to do with proper dress decorum for standing on the Senate floor. Speak to that.
Yeah, it's a fact in history that until 1993, which was the beginning of the Clinton administration, there was a flood of Democrats that began to be elected into the House and into the Senate. And on the Senate floor, up until 1993, it was an unspoken rule among the professionals that governed that body that a woman was not allowed to wear a pair of slacks at all. Every woman that came onto the floor to speak, to represent, was supposed to wear a modest dress until one of the newly elected Democrats came onto the floor with a pair of pants. And the story goes that when she walked into the Senate hall and took her place on the floor in the Congress, there was an audible gasp in that building that a woman actually had the audacity to come into that professional setting with a pair of slacks on.
The
So we've come a long way.
the dress code regarding the White House changed
That's correct.
with the inception of the Clinton White House. If you've ever read the book Unlimited Access by Gary Aldrich, it is a must read to see the decline in decorum in American politics. Gary Aldrich was one of 2 FBI agents attached to the White House that did background checks. He was a decorated FBI special agent. He had been a part of the of many major cases, kidnapping cases, criminal bank robbing cases, many high profile cases. Gary Aldrich worked on the Patty Hearst case, if you ever
Yes,
remember that.
Patty Hearst.
So as a last assignment prior to his retirement, he was attached to the Clinton White House to do background checks. And he said, we ran into trouble after trouble after trouble. And he said, the first day we were there, we were astounded at what we saw come into the cafeteria. He said men would come into the cafeteria with blue jeans on, extremely unkempt. He said they wouldn't have their hair combed.
Yeah.
They would have casual clothing on. And he said it was a shock to the White House culture. He said when they would get up from the table, they'd leave trash and junk laying everywhere. He said that had never happened prior to the Clinton administration. Yeah. He said we couldn't get background checks done, and we were blocked by the Clinton administration over and over again because of the fact that many of the White House staffers employed by the Clinton administration had outstanding criminal warrants against them, and they did not want them to be excluded from the White House. A must read. If you'll go back and get that book on Amazon, you will be astounded. But the bottom line was there was a decorum shift, and it had to do with the dress of the body. And that's what we're seeing, not just culturally, but we're seeing it now in the church. Mm-hmm. And as a traveling preacher around the country, can I say this without being crude or rude? I have literally, without trying to, have had to look at by walking through the door women's undergarments because of the shortness of their skirts in the house of God. I have had to turn my head when women were at the altar because of flashing breast flesh in the altar. I have literally seen people working in the sound booths wearing halter top body suits in Baptist churches. So this is something that we need to talk about. This is something that we need to deal with. And we'll be back next week, and we're going to talk about it again. Stay tuned. We'll be back.